The Alpha King claimed the bride everyone rejected, and was stunned when her face was revealed. The castle of the Lichen Kingdom stood tall on the cliffs, its black towers rising like jagged teeth against the evening sky. Storm clouds gathered above, casting long shadows over the land, and the wind whispered through the stone walls like a secret. Inside the great hall, candlelight flickered over the polished floor, and the air was thick with anticipation. Tonight was the night of the bride selection, an ancient ceremony where the Alpha King would choose a bride to stand beside him and help lead the kingdom. Many nobles and pack leaders filled the hall, their robes glittering and faces proud. Whispers swirled among them, sharp as arrows. Each noblewoman stood in line, her posture perfect, her eyes bright, yet even the most beautiful ones felt the invisible weight of judgment. Selara stood apart from them, near the back of the hall. She was tall but slender, with dark hair that fell in soft waves over her shoulders. Her eyes, a deep shade of amber, held a quiet strength, though her heart beat fast with nerves. She wore a simple dress, unlike the ornate gowns of the others, and for that many had already whispered behind her back. "She is cursed," a young noblewoman said, pointing at her with a delicate hand. "No alpha would want a bride from her line." "She brings misfortune," another whispered. "Her mother was exiled long ago. She is not worthy." Selara heard the words but did not speak. She had grown used to being rejected, used to being the one everyone avoided. She had spent years hiding in the shadows, knowing that her mother's past and the rumors of a curse had painted her as a threat in the eyes of the kingdom. Yet inside she carried a hope she dared not speak aloud, that perhaps, just perhaps, someone might see her for who she truly was. The great doors of the hall opened with a deep, echoing sound. All eyes turned as the Alpha King, Kalen, entered. He was a figure of power and mystery. Tall, with broad shoulders and sharp features, his presence commanded both fear and respect. His silver hair caught the candlelight, and his eyes, dark and intense, scanned the hall as if he could see every thought hidden in the minds of those present. The hall fell silent. No one dared breathe too loudly as Kalen walked forward, each step measured, each movement precise. Whispers stopped in midair. All the noblewomen held their heads high, hoping to catch his attention. But Kalen's eyes, cold and calculating, moved past them all, until they landed on Selara. The effect was immediate. A hush fell over the hall, a silence so deep it seemed to press against the walls. Selara felt a shiver run down her spine, but she held her ground, meeting his gaze. There was no fear in her expression, only a quiet challenge. Kalen stopped in front of her. The flickering candlelight made shadows dance across his face, but his eyes remained steady. The crowd waited, holding their breath. No one moved. "I claim her," Kalen said, his voice deep and unwavering. It echoed through the hall like the roll of distant thunder. A murmur of shock ran through the nobles. Whispers turned into gasps. The women who had lined up with hope and pride now looked at Selara with disdain and disbelief. How could the Alpha choose her, the one everyone had rejected? Selara felt her heart pound in her chest. She had expected rejection, perhaps even cruelty, but never this. She had prepared herself to be ignored, to fade into the shadows, yet here she was, standing in the center of the hall, chosen by the most powerful being in the kingdom. The murmurs grew louder. "He must be joking," one nobleman said, shaking his head. "The Alpha would never choose her. She is cursed." Kalen ignored them. He extended his hand toward Selara, and though her hand shook, she stepped forward and took it. A spark passed between them, subtle but undeniable, and it was enough to silence the crowd. As Kalen led her toward the throne room, Selara could feel eyes following her every step. Some were filled with envy, some with suspicion, and some with fear. She held her head high, refusing to show weakness, even as her mind raced. In the throne room, Kalen turned to her, studying her as one might study a puzzle. "Why do you stand so tall when everyone speaks against you?" he asked, his voice low but intense. Selara hesitated, then spoke truthfully. Because I have no one to stand for me except myself. Kaelin's eyes narrowed slightly, as if he were both testing her and intrigued by her answer. He could sense the strength within her, the quiet resilience that refused to bend under the weight of scorn. Few could face the court with such composure, and even fewer could meet his gaze without fear. The court watched as Kaelin seated himself, Selara standing beside him. Though the noblewomen tried to hide it, their faces reflected disbelief, jealousy, and anger. No one had expected this turn of events, and for the first time that night, Selara realized the truth. Being chosen by Kaelin would change her life forever, but it would also put her in the center of danger she could not yet see. The night grew late, and the ceremony continued with music and ritual, but Selara's mind was elsewhere. She thought of her mother, of the stories whispered in the dark about curses and betrayal. She thought of the life she had led in solitude, hiding from a world that had rejected her. And now, she thought, she would have to step into a new life, one filled with power, mystery, and perhaps peril. Kaelin observed her carefully, noting every small gesture, every flicker of emotion. He was a man used to control, to knowing the outcomes before events even unfolded. Yet Selara was different. She carried secrets, perhaps even power, that he could not yet understand. And that both intrigued and unsettled him. As the night drew to a close, Selara was escorted to her chambers in the castle. The halls were long and shadowed, lined with towering portraits of past rulers and legendary warriors. The weight of history pressed against her as she walked, and for a moment she wondered if she was truly ready for what lay ahead. In her room, she finally allowed herself to breathe. She looked out at the moonlit cliffs, the ocean waves crashing far below, and felt a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. She was no longer invisible. She had been chosen. And though the world might still judge her, she had survived this night, and she had survived Kaelin's scrutiny. But the night was not yet over. From the high balcony above, a shadow moved silently, watching Selara with eyes that gleamed like dark jewels. Their intentions were unknown, but the presence of this silent observer hinted at danger that had only just begun to stir. Selara, unaware of the watcher, felt a strange connection to Kaelin, though it was wrapped in mystery and tension. She sensed that he, too, was feeling something he could not name, an intrigue, a pull toward her that went beyond duty or ritual. And though neither of them spoke it aloud, both understood that their lives had been irrevocably changed tonight. The storm outside began to swell, thunder rolling across the cliffs, lightning illuminating the black towers for fleeting moments. It was as if the world itself sensed the beginning of a new story, one of power, secrets, and the slow, dangerous bloom of trust, and perhaps even love. Selara sat by the window, the veil of the past still lingering over her, but for the first time she allowed herself to feel hope. Tomorrow she would step into the unknown, into a world that had rejected her, and yet had now claimed her as its own. And somewhere in the shadows the silent observer moved closer, their presence a quiet promise of the challenges to come. Selara's journey had begun. She had been rejected, yet chosen. She was alone, yet watched. And as the wind howled against the stone walls, she understood that nothing in her life would ever be the same again. The Alpha King had claimed her, and the kingdom would never forget it. Morning came slowly over the Lichen Kingdom. The sky was a pale gray, the sun hidden behind heavy clouds that hung low over the cliffs. Rain had fallen during the night, leaving the black stones of the castle slick and dark. Inside, Selara stirred awake in her chambers. Her hands trembled slightly as she rose, the events of the previous night replaying in her mind. She had been chosen by the Alpha King, Kaelin, the one everyone had feared and respected. The thought still felt unreal, almost like a dream she might wake from at any moment. Selara dressed simply, tying her dark hair back, careful not to disturb the neat braid she had managed to make the night before. She peered out the window at the castle courtyard below, where servants moved silently through the wet stone corridors. The castle itself was alive with quiet motion, ancient walls and towering halls holding secrets that seemed to watch her as much as she watched them. A soft knock at her door startled her. "Enter," she called, steadying her voice. The door opened to reveal Kalen standing in the doorway. Even in the dim morning light, he looked like a figure carved from stone, tall, commanding, with a presence that could make hearts quicken. His silver hair was damp from the morning mist, and his eyes, dark and intense, held a curiosity that unsettled her. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm yet firm. "You slept well," Solara inclined her head. "As well as one can when the entire kingdom watches." Her words carried a hint of irony, but Kalen only gave a faint smile, a shadow of amusement crossing his face. "I have something for you," he said, holding out a small, intricately carved box. "Open it." Inside lay a pendant, a delicate silver chain with a pendant shaped like a crescent moon. "It is a symbol of the Alpha's trust," he explained. "Wear it, and it will mark you as mine, both to the kingdom and to yourself." Solara hesitated for a moment, then accepted it, fastening it around her neck. It rested lightly against her chest, a subtle weight, both real and symbolic. She felt a strange mix of honor and fear. To be marked by Kalen was to step fully into a world that she had never belonged to, a world of power, expectation, and danger. Kalen studied her silently. "You will need to learn quickly," he said finally. "The castle is not just a home. It is a place of history, secrets, and rules that must be understood. If you are to survive and to stand beside me, you must know them all." Solara nodded, her determination firming. "I am ready to learn," she said, though inside a flutter of doubt lingered. She was ready to face the challenges, but what she could not yet know was how much of herself she would have to reveal in the process. Kalen led her through the castle, corridors that seemed to stretch forever, lined with portraits of past rulers. Some of the faces were stern, others kind, but all bore the weight of centuries. "These are your predecessors," Kalen said. "You must respect them, for their choices shaped everything you now see. But do not let them scare you. The past belongs to them. You belong to the future." Solara's eyes lingered on the portraits, her thoughts drifting to the stories her mother had whispered to her as a child, tales of kings and queens, of magic and betrayal, of power that could save or destroy. And then she noticed something odd. One portrait, hidden in shadow at the far end of the hallway, seemed to shimmer slightly, as if the light itself hesitated to touch it. The woman in the painting had dark hair like hers, and eyes that seemed to look straight at her. Kalen noticed her gaze. "Curiosity is good," he said quietly, "but be careful. Some secrets are meant to test you, not comfort you." Before Solara could respond, a sudden commotion echoed from the courtyard below. Servants and guards rushed past, their faces tight with urgency. Kalen's expression darkened. He turned to Solara. "Stay close. Do not wander. Some things are better seen together." They stepped onto the balcony overlooking the courtyard. A group of nobles had gathered, whispering and pointing. Solara's heart sank as she realized they were speaking of her. Some voices were filled with fear, others with anger. "She is cursed," one shouted. "The Alpha has made a mistake." Kalen's hand brushed hers briefly, a subtle reassurance. "Ignore them," he said, his voice low and commanding. "Their opinions are loud but empty. Power lies not in their whispers but in truth, and the truth is, you are chosen." The day passed with lessons and introductions. Solara met the head of the castle guards, who regarded her with suspicion, and the chief steward, who seemed almost fearful of her presence. She observed everything: the servants, the corridors, the courtyards, and even the quiet shadows that moved just beyond her vision. The castle was alive in ways she could not yet understand, and it seemed that every stone held memory, every portrait held a story, and every shadow hid a secret. That evening, Kalen summoned her to the library, a vast room filled with towering shelves, the air heavy with the scent of old parchment and ink. "Knowledge is power," he said, his voice echoing slightly among the shelves. "To survive here, you must know more than names and rules. You must understand the history of your kingdom and your own place within it." Selara listened carefully as he spoke, absorbing the lessons and watching the way his eyes seemed to pierce through her, as if searching for truth she had not even revealed to herself. She noticed the way he softened slightly when he spoke of justice, of loyalty, of the weight of leadership. Behind the cold, commanding exterior, there was a man burdened with responsibility, yet driven by something deeper, something she could not yet name. As the night deepened, Selara retired to her chambers once more. The storm outside had returned, rain tapping gently against the windows, thunder rolling softly in the distance. She wandered to the hidden corner of the room, where a small alcove held a mirror. As she gazed into her reflection, she saw not the timid girl who had been scorned by her peers, but a young woman capable of facing the unknown. She touched the crescent pendant at her neck, feeling the weight of Kaelin's trust and the invisible eyes of the kingdom upon her. Yet even in this quiet moment she was not alone. From the high balcony outside her window, a shadow moved silently, unseen. Its gaze was fixed upon her, observing, waiting. Selara sensed it, not consciously, but as a chill that ran down her spine, a reminder that the castle was full of more than history and stone. Danger lurked in quiet corners, and secrets slept beneath every floor. The next morning, Selara was awakened by a gentle tap at the door. A young maid entered carrying a tray of food. "Mistress," she said softly, "there is someone here to see you." Selara's brow furrowed. "Who?" The maid hesitated. He did not give his name, he only said it was urgent. Curiosity and fear mixed in Selara's chest. She followed the maid to the garden, a walled courtyard filled with roses and fountains. There, standing in the mist of the early morning, was a figure shrouded in a long cloak. The hood obscured his face, but the presence was unmistakable, calm, powerful, and deliberate. "Who are you?" Selara asked, keeping her voice steady despite the flutter of nerves in her chest. The figure lowered the hood, revealing a man whose face was sharp and pale, eyes a striking shade of silver that seemed almost unnatural. "I am someone who knows your past," he said, his voice low and even, "and I know the truth behind the whispers of curse and misfortune that follow you." Selara's heart pounded. "What truth?" she asked, though part of her feared the answer. "The truth is that your mother was betrayed, and the curse that was spoken of was not hers but forced upon her by those who sought power," the man said. "And now you carry that legacy, whether you wish it or not." Selara's hands trembled. She had spent her life hiding from judgment, from whispers, from the darkness of rumor. And yet here it was, laid bare in the garden mist, confronted by someone who seemed to know more than she did herself. Before she could respond, the figure stepped back into the shadows, leaving her alone with her racing thoughts. Selara realized that the castle, the kingdom, and even Kaelin's claim on her were far more complex than she had imagined. The past had not been buried, it had been waiting, patient, and now it had come for her. That night, as Selara lay in her bed, she stared at the ceiling, the silver pendant resting against her chest. Kaelin's lessons, the shadowy figure in the garden, the hidden portrait in the hallway, all of it pressed on her mind. She understood now that being chosen by the Alpha King was only the beginning. The path ahead was dangerous, uncertain, and full of secrets. And yet beneath the fear, a spark of resolve burned within her. She would face whatever came next, and she would do so with courage. Cliffhanger. As the castle slept, the shadow from the balcony slipped silently into the corridors. Moving the morning light crept slowly over the castle, casting long, pale shadows along the corridors. The rain from the previous night had left the stones glistening, and the air smelled of wet earth and flowers from the courtyard gardens. Solara rose from her bed with a mixture of anticipation and unease. The events of the last days had changed everything. She had been claimed by Kaelin, the Alpha King, had glimpsed secrets within the castle, and had been confronted by a shadowy figure who hinted at her mysterious past. As she prepared for the day, Solara could feel the weight of expectation pressing on her shoulders. The castle was alive with watchful eyes, and every glance from a servant or noble reminded her that she was no longer invisible. The pendant Kaelin had given her glinted softly in the morning light, a constant reminder of her claim and the power it represented. Her first task that day was a tour of the castle gardens with Kaelin. The gardens were vast and ancient, a maze of hedges, fountains, and stone statues worn by centuries. Kaelin walked beside her, his hand occasionally brushing hers in moments too brief for anyone else to notice. Solara felt a mixture of nervousness and curiosity, unsure whether to feel admiration, fear, or something deeper she could not yet name. "You have adjusted well," Kaelin said, his voice calm yet commanding. "Most who are chosen by the Alpha struggle with the attention. You stand firm." "Why?" Solara looked at him, her amber eyes steady. "Because I have nothing left to lose," she said softly. "I have spent my life in the shadows, hiding from the world. Now I will face it." Kaelin's expression shifted, a flicker of surprise crossing his features. Few had ever answered him with such honesty, and fewer still had met his gaze without fear. He allowed a small smile, almost imperceptible, before continuing their walk. They spoke little, but their silence was not empty. Every glance, every gesture carried meaning. Solara began to notice the subtle changes in Kaelin. The way his eyes softened when he spoke of justice, the brief tension in his jaw when he discussed threats to the kingdom, and the way he watched her with a mix of curiosity and something unspoken, like he was trying to understand her as much as he was training her to understand the world around her. In the afternoon, Solara was taken to the castle's training hall. Kaelin wanted her to learn the ways of the kingdom, its discipline, its strength, and the quiet art of reading people. The hall was enormous, with high ceilings and walls lined with weapons and armor. Guards practiced their forms in silence, their movements precise and deadly. Solara observed carefully, her mind absorbing every motion, every shift in posture, every glance. "You must learn to see what is not said," Kaelin instructed. "A kingdom is ruled not by strength alone, but by understanding. Know your allies, your enemies, and yourself. Only then can you survive." Solara nodded, repeating his instructions silently in her mind. She understood that the lessons were not only physical, but also mental and emotional. To stand beside the Alpha was to navigate a world of hidden dangers, deceit, and shifting loyalties. She would need courage, intelligence, and patience, all qualities she had cultivated in quiet moments, alone, hidden from judgment. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the stone walls, Solara was escorted to the ceremonial hall for the evening's gathering. It was customary for the Alpha to meet with nobles and emissaries to show the unity of the kingdom. Solara walked beside Kaelin, her heart pounding as whispers followed her steps. The hall was crowded, filled with nobles who still held doubt and envy in their eyes. They whispered about her past, her lineage, and the rumors of a curse. Solara lifted her chin, refusing to meet their stares with fear. Kaelin's presence beside her was a shield and a challenge. It reminded her that she had been chosen, that she was now part of a world that could no longer ignore her. During the banquet, Solara was expected to perform a ceremonial blessing, a ritual where brides demonstrated their grace and composure. The moment had arrived, and she stepped forward. Slowly she removed the veil that had concealed her face, revealing her features to the gathered court. A hush fell over the room. Gasps rippled through the crowd, eyes widening in shock and disbelief. Solara's face was striking, her features elegant and strong, yet carrying a familiar beauty that seemed almost otherworldly. Her eyes, deep amber, held a fire that spoke of courage, resilience, and hidden strength. Kalen's gaze locked on hers, and for the first time a flicker of awe crossed his expression. He saw not only her beauty but the history and power that she carried. Selara's identity, hidden beneath layers of scorn and secrecy, now stood revealed, undeniable. Whispers turned into murmurs and murmurs into speculation. "She is magnificent," one noblewoman whispered, unable to hide her astonishment. "Could it be that she is descended from the lost line of queens?" Selara's heart raced, but she kept her composure. She had expected fear, envy, and rejection, but admiration had been something she had rarely encountered. And yet, even in this moment of revelation, danger lingered. Somewhere in the crowd, eyes followed her too closely, and she felt the presence of schemes forming, whispers she could not yet understand. After the ceremony, Kalen led her to a quiet balcony overlooking the castle gardens. The moon had risen, silver and full, casting light on the wet stones and dark hedges. Solara felt a sudden connection to Kalen, an unspoken bond that neither had yet named. "You have revealed yourself," Kalen said softly, "yet there is more I need to know. You carry secrets, I can feel them, and the kingdom will test you for them." Solara looked at him, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions within. "I have nothing left to hide," she said, though she knew that even these words were only partly true. There were memories buried deep, stories of her mother and whispers of a past that had not yet come to light. Kalen nodded, his gaze intense. "Then you will need to trust me, as I trust you." Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden commotion in the garden below. Figures moved quickly among the shadows, too fast for ordinary people. Kalen's eyes narrowed, and without a word, he disappeared from the balcony, Solara following instinctively. In the moonlit gardens, they discovered the shadowy figure from the previous night. It was a man, cloaked and careful, his silver eyes gleaming as he stepped from the darkness. He bowed slightly, a gesture of respect and warning. "You are the one who has been chosen," he said, his voice low. "But you are not safe. Those who fear your past and the legacy you carry are already moving against you." Solara's chest tightened. "Who are you?" she demanded. "I am someone who knows the truth of your bloodline," he said. "Your mother's name was erased from history, but her deeds, her courage, and her curse remain in you. You must prepare, for the forces that seek to destroy you are strong and patient." Before she could respond, the man stepped back into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as he had appeared. Solara's mind raced. Her lineage, the whispered curse, the shadowy figures, all pointed to a larger story, one that she was only beginning to understand. When she returned to her chambers, Kalen was waiting. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held concern. "You have met him," he said, stating what she could not deny. Solara nodded, recounting what had occurred. Kalen listened carefully, his jaw tight, hands clasped behind his back. "The kingdom is full of hidden threats," he said finally. "Allies and enemies wear the same faces. You must be vigilant, and you must be ready to face whatever comes next, both in the castle and in your own past." Solara felt a mix of fear and determination. She had always survived by hiding, by being careful and quiet. But now she realized survival would require courage, strategy, and trust in those who had chosen her. And perhaps trust in Kalen, the man who had claimed her when no one else would. Days passed, and Solara continued her lessons and her exploration of the castle. She learned the ways of the guards, observed the rituals of the court, and studied the portraits of past rulers. Each discovery brought both clarity and more questions. Who had her mother been? What power had been hidden in her bloodline? And what role did Kalen truly see her playing in the kingdom's future? One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Kalen invited Solara to the library once more. He pulled a large, dust-covered book from the shelf, revealing illustrations of queens and warriors, some familiar, some lost to history. "This book holds the stories of those who came before you," he said. "Some were strong, some were weak, but all shaped the kingdom. You are not bound to their choices. You are free to create your own path. But you must know where you come from, or you will be lost when the shadows strike." Solara traced her fingers over the pages, seeing images of women with faces that resembled hers, their eyes carrying the same fire. She realized then that her claim by Kalen was not a random act, it was destiny. She was chosen because she carried a legacy, one that had been hidden for generations. As the night deepened, Solara returned to her chambers, the weight of knowledge heavy on her shoulders. The shadows of the past were not gone. They moved silently through the corridors, waiting for the right moment. But she would not be afraid. She had been rejected, scorned, and hidden. Now she was revealed, and she was ready to face what came next. The castle of the Lichen Kingdom was quiet at dawn, but the silence carried a tension that could be felt in the bones. Solara stood on the balcony of her chambers, the silver pendant at her neck glinting in the soft morning light. The storm from the previous days had passed, but the air was thick with anticipation. She could feel it in every step she took, every breath she drew. The kingdom was changing, and she would play a part in shaping that change. Since being claimed by Kalen, Solara had grown stronger each day. She had learned the ways of the castle, the subtle art of reading people, and the quiet strength that comes from understanding one's own power. She had observed the guards, the nobles, and even the servants, noticing who moved with loyalty and who hid motives beneath polite smiles. Every day was a lesson, every glance a test. Kalen joined her on the balcony, silent at first. His presence was commanding, yet there was a softness when he stood near her, a recognition that she had grown into the role he had chosen for her. His silver hair caught the sunlight, and his dark eyes were fixed on the distant hills beyond the cliffs. "The shadows are moving," he said finally, breaking the silence. "The rivals who wish to weaken the kingdom are patient. They have been watching you as carefully as I have." Solara's amber eyes met his. "I am ready," she said quietly, though her heart raced with anticipation and nerves. She had faced fear before, but the danger that now approached was unlike anything she had known. It was no longer whispers or hidden glances. It was an open threat to the throne, to Kalen, and to her own life. Kalen placed a hand on her shoulder, a firm but reassuring touch. "And I will be by your side. But remember, trust is a weapon as strong as any sword. Know who stands with you and who stands against you." The day passed in careful preparation. Solara moved through the castle with confidence, speaking with the head of the guards and the chief steward, solidifying alliances and understanding the strength of loyalty within the walls. She was no longer the quiet, rejected woman of the past. She had become someone the castle itself seemed to recognize as a force to be reckoned with. As evening fell, the sky darkened with storm clouds again, and Kalen called for a council in the great hall. The nobles and leaders of the kingdom gathered, their faces masks of civility, though Solara could see the doubt and curiosity in their eyes. They had witnessed her reveal, the strength she had shown, and now they were waiting to see what she and Kalen would do next. Kalen stood at the head of the table, Solara beside him. His voice carried through the hall, calm yet commanding. "The kingdom is strong because of its people, its loyalty, and its courage. But there are those who wish to see it fall. They have hidden in shadow, plotting against us. We will face them together, me, and the woman I have chosen to stand beside me." Solara's heart quickened. She had expected fear, whispers, perhaps even rejection, but she was met with silence at first, followed by careful nods. Some of the nobles were uncertain, but they could not deny the strength that radiated from her presence. The council meeting ended, and the first signs of confrontation arrived that night. A messenger brought urgent news. A faction from the rival territories had begun to move against the castle, seeking to take advantage of the Alpha's focus on Solara. Kalen's expression hardened, and he turned to Solara. "This is your first true test," he said. "The rivals believe they can exploit weakness. Show them the strength of a chosen one." Selara's mind raced, but she did not hesitate. She had spent her life preparing for moments like this, even if she had not known it. She organized the castle's defenses, moved the guards into strategic positions, and communicated with those she had earned the trust of. Every action was precise, every word measured. The storm outside mirrored the tension within the castle walls. As night deepened, the rival faction launched their attack. Shadows moved along the outer walls, and the sound of clashing steel and the shouts of soldiers echoed through the night. Selara remained in the command room with Kaelin, their hands brushing occasionally as they directed the defense. There was no fear between them now, only focus and trust. Selara's heart pounded, not with fear, but with the realization that she was no longer powerless. She had been claimed, trained, observed, and tested, and now she wielded her courage as a weapon. She issued commands with confidence, guiding the guards with a strategy that surprised even Kaelin. The rebels found themselves outmatched, not only by the strength of the castle, but by the intelligence and resolve of the woman they had hoped to weaken. Hours passed, and by the first light of dawn, the castle stood victorious. The rival faction had been repelled, their forces scattered, and their plans exposed. Selara and Kaelin stood together atop the castle walls, looking out at the quieted battlefield. The storm clouds had cleared, revealing the pale light of morning breaking over the horizon. Kaelin turned to Selara, his expression unreadable at first, then softening as he stepped closer. "You have done more than survive," he said, his voice low and steady. "You have proven your strength, your wisdom, and your courage. I am proud to have you by my side." Selara felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of relief and pride. "I could not have done it alone," she said, meeting his gaze. "Your guidance, your trust, it made the difference." Their hands found each other, fingers entwining, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond that had grown between them. It was not only trust and loyalty, but something deeper, respect, understanding, and the first stirrings of love, unspoken yet undeniable. The next days were filled with recovery and revelation. As the castle returned to its usual rhythm, Selara began to uncover more about her heritage. The portraits she had noticed earlier, the hidden books in the library, and the whispers of the shadowy figure all began to fit together. Her mother had been a queen of great courage, betrayed by those who feared her power. The curse that had followed her was not real. It had been a story created to mask the betrayal and to control the people of the kingdom. Selara realized that she was the last true heir of that line, and the claim she now held was not only personal, but a restoration of her family's honor. Kaelin observed her quietly as she pieced together the truth. There was a sense of pride in his gaze, but also something more. Relief, perhaps, that the woman he had chosen was not only worthy but extraordinary in ways he had not yet imagined. The final confrontation came unexpectedly. A remaining loyalist of the rival faction attempted a last-ditch effort to destabilize the kingdom. They entered the castle under cover of night, intending to strike at Selara, but she was ready. Guided by instinct, courage, and the lessons she had learned, she faced the intruder. Kaelin arrived at the same moment, their movements coordinated as if they had always been a single force. Together, they defeated the threat without harm to the castle or its people. After the confrontation, Selara and Kaelin stood in the grand hall, the dawn of a new day spilling through the windows. The nobles who had once doubted her now looked upon her with respect, some even with admiration. Selara felt the weight of the kingdom's acceptance, a recognition that she had earned her place not only beside the Alpha but in the hearts of those she now led. Kaelin stepped closer, his presence warm and grounding. "You are more than I could have hoped," he said softly. "Not only my bride but my equal, my partner. Together we will lead this kingdom, stronger than it has ever been." Selara felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of pride, love, and relief. She had been rejected, scorned, and hidden for so long. Now she was revealed, accepted, and powerful in ways she had never imagined. Her journey had been one of courage, growth, and discovery. And now, standing beside the Alpha King, she understood the full measure of her strength. The kingdom, once shadowed by doubt and fear, now glowed with promise. Solara had embraced her destiny, reclaimed her family's honor, and forged a bond with Kaelin that would shape the future. And though the past had left scars and shadows, she had proven that courage, trust, and love could overcome even the darkest of beginnings. As they stood together on the balcony, looking out at the horizon where the first light of day met the sea, Solara felt a sense of completion, yet also anticipation. She knew that challenges would come again, that shadows would always linger. But now she was ready. She was no longer the rejected bride. She was a queen in her own right, a partner to the Alpha, and a force the kingdom could depend on.